Hello everyone, welcome back to another coding tutorial in this Java series. In today's coding tutorial, we are going to show you different errors you may encounter in Java, how to work with them, and how to handle them using the try, catch blocks. So let's go ahead and jump in. In this case, I've created a Java program or a Java file called error handling. And inside of this main method, we're just going to do a bunch of examples of how to use a try catch block. Again, technically this could be organized into different methods, but I don't want to merge too many concepts into one video. So we are just going to do various try catch blocks all within the same main method. So let's go ahead and get started with our very first try catch block. So we'll go ahead and write our comment out so we know what we're working with. Now, the first one we're going to work with is going to show us our arithmetic exception. All right. Now, in this case, oops, spelling this wrong, excuse me. All right. So, our arithmetic exception. First, you're going to have your try, and then we are going to have our catch block. Oops. Like that. So this is going to be the end of catch 1. And that way we can kind of see where our structure is ending. So we're getting an error because we're not giving it an exception here. So that's what that's for. But of course, we said we're going to work with our arithmetic exception. And then we are going to put E after that to represent whatever that exception is. So E is basically like a placeholder to pretty much represent whatever the exception is that's being returned. So now that we have this is the basic structure of a try catch. Of course, we have nothing in it. Our code will not do anything, but we have no problems, so we're good to go. Now first, what we're going to do is just put a simple example in here, and we're going to use the divide by 0. All right, and we're going to say int x is equal to, and we'll give it a number, so let's say 50 divided by 0. And this is going to cause a arithmetic exception because we can't divide by 0. So let's go ahead and just do a simple print statement to print out that value, which I forgot I had it down at the bottom. Oops, system.out.print. But in this case, I'll just go ahead and type it since I already started. So basically, we're going to try out some code here. We're basically saying we're going to create an integer with the name of x, and it's going to hold this value. And we're saying we want to print it out. But we don't know if our arithmetic is going to work out as we expected it to. In this case, we technically know it's not, but just in other scenarios, such as plus or minus or, something crazy, you don't know if the arithmetic is going to work out how you think. So this is what the arithmetic exception is for when you're doing math calculations in your try block. Now, in our catch block, we're basically just going to put some information. Not that we have to try to change the outcome, but we're just pretty much notifying the user that, hey, something went wrong. try again, instead of just crashing the code and we see that red lines there. So in here, we're going to say system dot out dot print line, and we are going to go ahead and say error can't divide by 0. All right, so we have that. And here I'm just going to go ahead and put our statement. Now this is the end of our main method, so I'll go ahead and tab that down, but we're going to put this here and we're going to say end of try catch block 1. All right. So now that we have our try catch block set up, we'll go ahead and test it. So first saving, then running. All right. And you see immediately that we have this error that says, or not an error, but we have some text that says error can't divide by 0. Basically meaning we had a issue in our try block and our code stopped working. And instead of us seeing that error message come out to us, we are seeing the information in the catch block being printed. So we're pretty much being told, hey, whatever you had in the try block did not work, but here's the next situation. So technically in your catch block, you can do more. Like we could have changed the int x equals blah, blah, blah to something else. We could have printed more statements. You can pretty much put anything you want in that catch block. But in this example, I'm just simply putting a print statement to say what's going on. And lastly, you see after our try catch executes that your code will continue to run. So outside of our try catch, we had one simple print statement that says end of try catch block 1. So in the event that we didn't do this case, right? So let's say we didn't do our try block, and I'm just going to cut this out. So let's just say we did int x equals 50 divided by 0. And then we say line. We're going to say we're going to print it. All right. So if we were to do something like that and we were to run it, then you see immediately we are getting an exception right here. It's saying exception in your main method in this file, and it's saying that we are getting an arithmetic exception dividing by 0, and it's telling us here it's on line number 11 based on this digit here. So it pretty much immediately crashed our program. And this is why using that try catch is so important, because that try catch didn't necessarily crash out our code. It may not have worked as expected, but we did not see any errors, and therefore it causes no confusion to your users. So that is why your try catch is important. So now that we pretty much covered that example, I'm going to go ahead and place it back, and we'll continue on with another one. But that is just showing you why you should always implement a try catch when you are working with some code that you think might run into an exception issue. So there's also the case where you can have those multiple catch blocks. So we'll go ahead and do our try catch block 2. And we're going to have multiple catch blocks. And in this case, we are going to use different exceptions. All right, so now that we have that, we're going to start off with our try. We're going to start with our catch. And remember, we're doing multiple catches, so we're going to have another one here. All right, now inside of our catch, we're going to go ahead and put some exceptions. Now, at this point, we don't know what our catch exceptions are going to be, so let's just go ahead and start with our try section. So first, we're going to create a string str equals null. Basically, we don't have any information in the string, but we're just creating it. And then we are going to say that we are going to print out str.length. Oops, can't type today. str.length. All right. So in this case, we have a empty string. So if we are trying to print out the length, we basically will run into a null pointer exception. All right. It's basically saying that we're pointing to a empty object. So whatever we're trying to do, it can't work because it technically just exists but has no information to work with. So to do this catch block, we are going to put what our expected exception would be, and in this case, it will be the null pointer exception and then the placeholder of E. Now inside of this exception, we could simply say a print statement, and we could say no value was found for the string. All right. And that's basically our standard try catch. Now, there may be a case where something else happened, not that we're expecting it to, but there could be the case. And in that case, you could just have a generic exception. So exception E, and we'll say here another unexpected exception occurred. All right. So now we have two catch blocks in this case, and we'll go ahead and just run our code. So let's run that. So here you see that it says no value was found for the string, basically saying we encountered a null pointer exception, which we already knew. Now, in this case, let's change up our print statement. Let's change what it says inside of it just to see what happens. So we'll just go ahead and get rid of the dot length. We'll run it again. And you see it pretty much prints that we have null there. Now, if we were to do something like char at, we'll say 0. Let's run that. And again, I'm just kind of testing different methods with strings to kind of see what could happen within our code. And then here again, you see it says no value was found for the string. So in this case, this last catch that we have here is kind of like a default saying, hey, something else other than our null pointer exception is happening. And remember when I said you're working with multiple catch statements, that very first exception that you think is going to occur when working with your try block should go first. And in this case, we know for the most part that we are going to run into a null pointer exception because our string is null. Okay? So In this case, that's why we're running into this issue. Now, technically, we could provide it with a value. So we could say here, like test, and run that. And when we run our code, then we are going to see that it's going to run the first character of that string, which was char at 0, and it works. So our try block works. We didn't have any exceptions. Everything worked fine. But as soon as we change it to null, we would encounter a null pointer exception, and therefore you would see the output of that null pointer exception. All right. So that is two examples of your try catch, one with try catch and then another with your try and multiple catches. And then we are going to also take a look at another example. So we will do our try catch finally example. All right, try catch finally block. All right, and here we're going to write that out. So try, then we're going to have a catch, then we are going to have a finally. All right, now in this case, we are going to again fill in our try first. So in here, we'll go ahead and use an array. So we'll say int numbers equals, we're just going to give it some numbers. All right. Oops, forgot my semicolon. All right. Then we're going to print it out. So system dot out dot print line, and then we're going to say we are going to print out something from our numbers. So first we'll say numbers, and then we will say 5. All right. So that's our try. Now inside of our catch, we are going to put an exception that we may come across. And in this case, we are working with arrays, so it is possible we can run into an array index out of bounds exception. So we'll put here array index out of bounds exception E for our placeholder, and then we are going to say system.out.print line invalid array index. All right. Then we have our finally, right? So this is just going to say that we are going to run this code regardless. So system.out.print line. This is the third try catch example we have tested. All right. So cool. We have a try catch finally. So let's go ahead and see how this works. And we're going to go ahead and run our file. And you see here, it immediately says invalid array index, because technically this index does not exist. We would have to add some more elements. So 0, 1, 2, 3. We stop at 3. We're asking for 5. It does not exist. So we have an exception for array index out of bounds. And because we have that, it's printing out invalid array index. Now, After that catch occurs, you see that we technically still have, this is the third try catch example we have tested, which is basically showing you that finally always runs regardless. So to test this theory again, let's go ahead and change it to a known index, run it, and test it from there. And you see it prints out that number that is at the 0 spot, but it still prints out the output of the finally. So regardless of if the try runs or the catch runs, the finally will always come out. So just keep that in mind. So I'll go ahead and change this back to our exception just for this error handling coding tutorial purposes. But that's kind of the idea of your try, catch, finally block. All right. And lastly, we can use our other example to use another common exception you may come across. So we'll say try, catch, example 4, and this is going to be input mismatch exception. So we are going to have, in this case, let's do a scanner. So again, when you're working with your imports, you can go ahead and default and import everything within that specific package. So java.util. And we know there's a lot in java.util. So you see we hit our period. There's all of that in there. So now that you're at the point where you're creating more complex code, I just recommend using the asterisk so you don't have to individually call each one out within, or each class that's in this package out. So how do you do this? Just simply add an asterisk. Once you do this one line, it literally will import all of the classes that are in java.util. So you no longer have to pinpoint which ones to import. So when you are working with your code, I would just suggest doing this because you never know what packages or classes you may need to use in this package. So just go ahead and import it to make your life a lot easier. So now that we imported that, we technically can create a scanner class. So scanner, and we'll say sc equals new scanner system dot in. All right, now we're going to do a try and a catch. And our catch, we know we're using input mismatch exception, and again using our placeholder of E. All right, so we technically have a scanner object, then we have a try catch set up to work with this scanner. So in here, we are going to say something to the user to print. So we'll say system.out.print line. We'll say enter a number. All right. Next, we'll say int x is equal to sc.next int. All right. So once the user inputs that, we'll say system.out.print line, and we'll say you entered plus x. All right. Now, when we're using our input mismatch exception catch block, again, we're just going to say some sort of message to the user so they know what happened. So system out.println, and we're going to say you entered a invalid number. All right, so this is basically going to see if the user entered in a number. If they didn't, we're not going to crash our code. We're just going to simply tell them that they entered a invalid number. So we'll go ahead and run this. You see our code runs fine. It says enter a number. I'm going to type a string, so we're going to say test and enter. So our output is immediately you entered a invalid number. So again, we are getting this exception because we cannot assign a string to an integer of x, and that's why we're getting this problem. So if you were to run this code again and give it a number, let's say, I'm going to click down here, we're going to say 3. Then you see it says you entered 3, and pretty much it's working. So this is very useful when you're working with scanners and you're trying to make sure that your users do a specific input. If they don't, then the exception will kick in and pretty much let them know they did not do what you expected and that it is causing some errors of some way, shape, or form. So overall, this is how you would use your try catch in different scenarios. Again, we did not cover all of the cases or exceptions in here, but we covered some of the common ones you would see, how to set up a try catch block, and how to implement it in your Java code. So I hope that you find this useful. And in our next video, we will get into working with files in Java to close us out for this series. So stay tuned. You're almost to the end of the series and you don't want to miss what's coming up next. So I'll see you in our final lecture video.